One of my favorite things to read is the personal essay. I like the personal essay because it's kind of a blend of fiction writing and that there are elements of um, characters and dialogue and description and setting, but they go a little bit further than that because while fiction is basically a lie told with the truth, in that it's fiction, it's not true, nonfiction essays are a developed truth. In fiction, you're creating a truth that may exist already, a universal truth, but you're creating the story in which to tell it. In a nonfiction essay, there's already a truth there, but you're getting it across to your reader. And as you'll see in your readings, the various kinds of essays have different purposes and different ways of getting that across, but they're told in a more creative way. It's different from an academic essay in that it's not the typical 5 paragraph structure. It's often more creative, just like the fiction version would be. The word essay comes from the French word essai, meaning trial, attempt, or experiment. You're attempting to discover a truth. In essence, a personal essay is a journey or a trial of your thoughts. Often we don't know what we really think about something until we write it out. And as we write it out, we discover, and that's part of the writing process is discovery, what we really know and what we really think and feel about something. Often you'll find that in the midst of writing your essay, your opinion on that topic may change or become more enlightened or maybe take a slightly different path than you thought it would have. And that will come about through the research that you do, through the writing process itself. Aldous Huxley said the essay is a device for saying almost everything about almost anything. So what is a personal essay? It's an account of the author's personal experience, thus why we call it a personal essay. It's writing which explores a topic, usually personal or persuasive or opinionated or all of the above. And it typically focuses on key character traits or themes. Just so that you get a little bit of background for the personal essay. Historically, as a literary form, the essay goes back to the late 1500s. Consider that poetry has been around since before King David, and our basic history of the personal essay only goes back to the 1500s. That means we have about 500 years of essays, where we have centuries, millennia of poetry. So that's something to think about. Essayists have often written about the issues of their day. They often emphasize reasoning, the logos. The author had to present himself, and still does need to present himself, as a voice to be trusted. That's your pathos. And it draws heavily upon personal experience plus personal reflections on those experiences. Those personal reflections are the bulk of your essay. They're the heart of your essay. If you don't reflect in your essay about what you're writing in your essay falls flat. There is a term, even in fiction, that some have dubbed as essayism, in which the author steps aside from the actual story and, in the voice of the narrator, will expound upon some truth that's just arisen in the story itself. And that essayism is the idea of reflecting on a thought, reflecting on a truth. So you really want to pay attention to what you're saying and then reflecting on that in the actual essay. And you're reflecting on truth. You want to make sure that the truths you're expounding on are worthy of your reader's time, for one, and that they're truly true. But since this is personal, you may be thinking, what if I don't remember everything? So know that not every detail must be exactly true. Insignificant details may be written according to the truth of memory. Everybody understands that when they're talking to you, when you're telling them a story of what happened, they're getting your version of it. And if they talk to your friend who was with you at the time, or your sibling, or your parent, or whoever, they would probably get a slightly different version of the story because everybody sees things differently. They remember things according to their own perspective. And so there's an acknowledgement that when you tell a story, it's according to the truth of your memory. Significant information that cannot be confirmed, you should not use. For instance, if there were some kind of historical significance, some kind of textbook accuracy that would be required for your essay and you can't guarantee it, then you shouldn't use it. The essence of dialogue should be true, but everybody knows it will not be exactly true. When you have a really good conversation with someone, and then you're talking about that conversation to someone later, you're kind of paraphrasing it, and you might get some of it completely accurately, and others of it will be a paraphrase of the gist of what the person said. And in putting that in your essay, that's fine, as long as you get the basic truth of what was said in that dialogue. You can fill in the gaps if they used be verbs or passive voice, or maybe you can't remember exactly what sentence structure they use. That's fine. Just put it in the style of how they typically talk, and we'll talk more about that later. And the idea of the conversation should be true. Barbara Kingsolver said memory is a complicated thing, a relative to truth, but not its twin. The purpose of your personal essays is to make the reader think. That's the whole reason we read personal essays, because we want to think about something, which means we need to trust you as the writer that you're not going to give us false information, and that you're going to write in a tone that is authoritative and trustworthy. Another purpose is to discover meaning through experience, and that's more for the reader and the writer to discover meaning through experiences. To introduce your reader to an idea or present an old idea in a new way. To entertain, enlighten, inform, or inspire. And notice that one of those purposes is to entertain. The personal essay does not have to be heavy. There doesn't have to be a gravity to this essay that's going to make or break the life of the reader, going to change history. Essays have done that, and they can do that, but that's not the only reason. There are many personal essays that are purely meant to delight, even though they have a truth at the end and there was a beneficial reading experience. Remember that you want to give your reader a reward for listening to you talk about yourself. Remember that not everything that has happened to you is interesting to everybody else. So what about your personal essay? What is the truth in it that makes it worth my time, your reader's time, to read it? The essays in your book, your Seagull Reader, will fall into one of two categories, personal or persuasive. You will learn to read and evaluate both types in order to learn how to write both types. Remember that there is a lot of writing and reading in this class. So you want to schedule about 12 hours of your week to devote just to writing alone. The title of this class is Effective Writing. Effective writing does not happen the night before a paper is due. I know that's the MO of students. I was a student once. I've had many students. I know how it works. But you don't want it to be that way. A good, effective piece of writing always takes time. It takes time to think about. It takes time to draft, to brainstorm. It takes time to go back and reread and edit and rewrite and restructure and all of those things that you have to do to make good writing. So make sure you're scheduling that time for yourself. The structure of your essay incorporates elements of fiction, and that's the characterization, the dialogue, the setting, different details, and we'll talk about those things in another lecture. It recreates the experience for the reader. And to do that, you need to make those details as accurate and vivid as possible so that your reader really feels like he's in that experience or watching that experience. It includes individual elements of personality. That's you, yourself as a writer, your personality as a writer should be in your essay. You don't want to sound like a robot writing out an essay. You want to sound like you writing an essay. It draws upon knowledge and research to make connections. Yes, I just said the word research, and we'll have another lecture on that. But know that when you're dealing with nonfiction, there will always be an element of research because it's truth and you want to make sure that you get the actual truth. Lee Gutkin said that personal essays attempt to show imagination, to demonstrate artistic and intellectual inventiveness, and still remain true to the factual integrity. Though often reading like fiction, it is not fiction. It is, or should be, as reliable as the most reliable reportage, although it seeks a larger truth than is possible through the mere compilation of verifiable facts, the use of direct quotations, and adherence to the rigid organizational style of the older forms. So it reads like fiction in that it has dialogue. It doesn't read like a research paper in which you're just reporting facts and verifying them. It's going to feel much more laid back, even though it's still using facts and it will still require some research. A personal essay should be part narrative, part reflective. A narrative is a story, an accounting of actions and events. There's a twofold promise at the beginning of your essay, and that is emotional and intellectual. You have to promise, not actually in words, but by the nature of somebody picking up your essay to read it, you have entered a bargain that you will offer them something emotional and intellectual. To fulfill that promise, you offer them clearly drawn characters, an introduced conflict that will be resolved in the end, specific details, and a balance of that logos, ethos, and pathos. Some of the narrative elements involved in a personal essay are as follows. The first is plot and scene. A plot is the sequence of events that occur in a story. It is closely connected to the concept of scene. Scenes include setting, dialogue, and action, depictions of action that occur in a definite time and place. Scenes are films in prose. People talk, walk, think, set tables, enter rooms, drive, go swimming, jump up and down, hunt. Anything that you can do should be in a scene. Think about a movie. If somebody just sat there doing nothing, there's not really any action. There's just somebody that may as well be a corpse in a chair. But when they're doing something, when someone's chasing after the villain, he's in a heated road chase, that's an action scene. You would use all kinds of action verbs and details to show where the characters are and what they're doing and what they're saying. And that's the same thing in your writing. Scenes use details, sensory imagery, dialogue, and characterization. Sensory imagery is imagery that uses the senses. It's details that use the sentence to provoke an image in your reader's mind. And we'll talk about that more in a later lecture. You'll read in Annie Dillard's essay, The Stunt Pilot, a really good example of plot and scene. If you were to list out the scenes in her essay, they might go something as listed below. Dillard goes to an air show in Bellingham. Later, Dillard flies with pilot Dave Ram around Mount Baker. Dillard tells how Ram crashed and died. Dillard flashes back to a point a few months after the air show, during which she was able to watch Ram practice near her home. And then you have, in addition to scene and plot, characters. In a personal essay, you are a major character in your narrative. Anyone else involved with the event you are writing about is also a character. You and others in your story should be painted with clarity through description and dialogue. And of course, we'll talk about all of those things in a later lesson. Another element for your essay is conflict. Conflict is a struggle that creates tension, which causes the story to move forward toward a resolution. Without a conflict, all you have is a sketch. So think about what in the essay has been the problem. What does your character want? What does he need? And if he gets it, or when he gets it, what is his reaction to it? And does that lead him to happiness or destruction or any of the in-betweens? And how is that all resolved? In an essay, conflict is tied heavily into the point of the essay. Usually the conflict arises as you, the author, struggle to understand some new or new-to-you truth. In Dillard's essay, the conflict is created by the author's growing understanding of what art is. She introduces the conflict on page 86 when she says, "I had thought I knew my way around beauty a little bit." The implication is that she didn't know art as well as she thought she had. So in the rest of her essay, she is resolving how much more she needs to know. And then you have the resolution, the new status quo at the end of the essay. The essay should show how you've grown, changed, or reached a new insight as a result of the experience you just described. James Joyce called this technique in fiction an epiphany. An essay, the ending should reveal your new understanding. It should not have a moral at the end. Putting a moral at the end of your story equals boring. You don't want to be preachy. Your reader wasn't there, hasn't picked up your essay to be preached at. Your reader wants to discover this truth with you, and so you lead the reader on this journey of discovering truth. And they pick up the little nuggets along the way that you have been dropping to them as you're writing your essay. And at the end, you come to that conclusion really kind of together. You're leading them into it, but he should be seeing it coming to an extent. If your whole essay is a story that's more or less interesting, and then at the end you've preached a sermon or a moral that wasn't really indicated throughout the rest of the essay, it makes for a really bad ending. Your reader's going to be very disappointed. Your teacher will be very disappointed. And it's an overall fail of an essay. Reflection. The reflective parts of your essay are those thinking transitions that tie your scenes together. Your reflections develop the main ideas and thought you are trying to communicate. In the stunt pilot, the first reflective part happens on the bottom of page 86, where Dillard is developing her main idea. She gets to the meat of what she's saying at the end, but notice that it is not a moral she tacks on, because she has spent so many paragraphs developing her thought. You may be thinking at this point, what if I don't have anything to write about? And in that, I want to assure you that everyone has something to write about. Eudora Welty said, "I am a writer who came of a sheltered life. A sheltered life can be a daring life as well, for all serious daring starts from within. Wallace Stegner said, "You take something that is important to you, something you have brooded about. You try to see it as clearly as you can and to fix in it a transferable equivalent. All you want in the finished print is the clean statement of the lens, which is yourself, on the subject that has been absorbing your attention." To help yourself get ideas for your own personal essays, it's a good idea to just start reading. And also do free writes. Just write about days that you remember, things that you have been thinking about, and that's probably the most important. What has been on your mind lately? Talk to your family, revisit old journals, significant memories, relationships, whether current or long ended, places that you've been, significant events in the world, art or literature that has influenced you. There is a wealth of inspiration for your personal essays.